My name is Olivia Carter, and at 28 years old, I never imagined my accounting degree would be used to untangle financial fraud committed by my own family. I had always been the responsible one, saving every penny while maintaining a perfect credit score. That all changed when I received a mortgage statement for $600,000 on a property I didn't own. When I confronted my parents, my mother's words still echo in my head. "Pay for your sister. It's your duty." I smiled that day, not from acceptance, but because I finally saw the truth. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If this resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of standing up for myself against family exploitation. I grew up in a modest brick house in a middle-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago, where kitchen tables hosted both Sunday dinners and serious family discussions. My parents, Richard and Martha Carter, instilled in us a sense of family, loyalty that bordered on obsession. Family above all wasn't just a saying in our house, it was the law, recited like scripture whenever decisions needed to be made. From an early age, the dynamic between my younger sister Emma and me was clearly defined. Emma, 4 years my junior, was the golden child with her warm personality, artistic talents, and uncanny ability to wrap our parents around her finger with a simple smile. While I excelled academically, earning scholarships and praise from teachers, at home my achievements were acknowledged with quick nods before conversations pivoted to Emma's latest painting or school play. My mother would often say, "Olivia has her brains to carry her through life, but Emma needs our support to find her path." This sentiment became the undercurrent of our childhood, shaping how resources, attention, and expectations were distributed between us. I learned to be self-sufficient early, managing my own homework, college applications, and eventually my finances without guidance. Meanwhile, my parents hovered over Emma's every move, providing tutors when she struggled in school and expensive art supplies to nurture her creativity. Despite this imbalance, I loved my sister and understood she wasn't responsible for our parents' favoritism. In high school, I developed an interest in numbers, finding comfort in their predictability and order. My parents pushed me toward medicine, arguing that becoming a doctor would bring prestige to the family, but I stood my ground for once and pursued accounting. "Numbers don't lie," I explained, "and I want a career built on something trustworthy." This comment earned me a week of cold shoulders from my mother, who viewed my choice as a rejection of her dreams for me. After graduating with honors from the University of Illinois with an accounting degree, I received an offer from a prestigious firm in Boston. The distance from Chicago wasn't accidental. I craved independence from the family dynamic that constantly cast me as supporting character in the Emma show. When I announced my move, my father looked disappointed, my mother tearful, and Emma genuinely sad. "Who will help me with my college applications?" she asked, seemingly unaware that I had navigated that process entirely alone 4 years earlier. Despite the distance, I maintained regular contact with weekly calls and visits during major holidays. I'd fly back to Chicago quarterly, sitting through family dinners where conversation inevitably centered around Emma's college experience, her friends, her struggles, and her potential. During these visits, I noticed occasional red flags, father asking detailed questions about my salary and savings, my mother commenting that my extra money could help the family, documents casually pushed toward me for signing during busy holiday gatherings. "Just some tax things your father needs for his records," she'd say, and trusting them, I'd sign without careful review. After 3 years at the firm, my dedication and analytical skills earned me a promotion to senior accountant with a substantial raise. For the first time, home ownership seemed within reach, and I began researching Boston neighborhoods and mortgage options. I created spreadsheets analyzing property values, tax implications, and estimated monthly payments based on my salary and savings. The prospect of having my own space, decorated to my taste without compromise, filled me with excitement I rarely allowed myself to feel. Then came that ordinary Tuesday last April when I sorted through my mail and found an envelope from Alpine Mortgage Services, a company I didn't recognize. Assuming it was just another pre-approval offer sent to boost my ego and tempt my wallet, I almost tossed it into the recycling bin. Some instinct made me open it instead, unknowingly setting in motion the unraveling of everything I thought I knew about family, duty, and self-worth. The envelope contained a mortgage statement with my name, social security number, and a property address in my hometown neighborhood, just 3 streets over from my parents' house. At first, I laughed, certain it was a clerical error or, perhaps, a sophisticated phishing attempt. The laughter died in my throat when I saw the outstanding principal: $594,823.15. My hand trembled as I reached for my laptop, logging into my credit monitoring service that I maintained religiously since college. The screen loaded agonizingly slowly, each second stretching into eternity until finally, there it was, a mortgage. Loan initiated 6 months prior during my Christmas visit home, with Alpine Mortgage Services listed as the lender. The room began to spin as my breathing quickened, black spots dancing at the edges of my vision as I slid from my chair onto the floor. Hugging my knees to my chest, I focused on counting backward from 100, a technique my therapist had suggested for anxiety attacks during particularly stressful tax seasons. By the time I reached 42, my breathing had normalized enough for rational thought to return. I called Alpine Mortgage Services with unsteady fingers, praying for a misunderstanding as the cheerful hold music mocked my growing dread. Thank you for calling Alpine Mortgage Services. This is Brenda speaking. How may I assist you today? The customer service representative's voice was professionally pleasant as I explained the situation, suggesting there must be an error connecting me to this enormous financial obligation. Brenda asked for verification details, which I provided mechanically, still clinging to hope. Yes, Ms. Carter, I can confirm this mortgage was originated on December 27th of last year for the property at 1842 Maple Avenue in Chicago, Illinois. The loan documents show your signature, witnessed and notarized, along with power of attorney authorization for Martha Carter, allowing her to manage the property and mortgage on your behalf. Each word felt like another brick stacking on my chest as I struggled to remain composed. Power of attorney? I never authorized that. There must be a mistake. Brenda's sympathetic tone shifted slightly to caution. Ms. Carter, these documents have been properly filed with the county. If you're claiming unauthorized use of your identity, even by a family member, that would constitute mortgage fraud, which is a serious federal offense. The implication hung heavily in the silence between us. I thanked her woodenly and ended the call, immediately pulling up my digital calendar from December. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. December 27th, 3 days after Christmas. The day my mother had asked me to sign just a few documents for my father's tax purposes, while I was distracted helping Emma set up her new laptop. The documents I'd signed without reading because we were running late for the annual Carter family dinner at my aunt's house. The multiple signature pages flipped quickly with minimal explanation. The notary I vaguely remembered as Dad's friend from the golf club who happened to stop by. My parents had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to commit fraud, using my excellent credit score and financial stability to secure a loan I knew nothing about. Worse, they'd somehow obtained power of attorney, giving my mother legal authority to make financial decisions in my name. I spent the next hour in a daze, mechanically gathering documentation. Screenshots of my credit report, copies of my work schedule proving I was only in Chicago briefly during the holidays, bank statements showing no deposits of loan money to my accounts, childhood memories resurfaced with new, sinister undertones, my mother's casual comments about my responsibility to ensure Emma's future, my father's jokes about my financial security being the family's safety net, the expectation that my success belonged not to me, but to all of us. By evening, shock had crystallized into determination. I called my supervisor, requesting emergency personal leave for a family crisis. I packed a small suitcase, loaded my documentation into a secure folder, and booked a hotel room in Chicago. As I climbed into my car for the 9-hour drive from Boston to Chicago, I felt something unexpected beneath the anger and betrayal. Liberation from the invisible chains of obligation I'd worn since childhood. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity that the family loyalty I'd been taught wasn't reciprocal, but extractive, designed to flow in one direction only. The 9-hour drive from Boston to Chicago gave me plenty of time to rehearse what I would say, scenarios playing on repeat in my mind like a twisted preparation for a high-stakes negotiation. I practiced keeping my voice steady when presenting the evidence, imagined maintaining eye contact when demanding answers, and prepared responses for the guilt trips and emotional manipulation I knew would come. What I couldn't prepare for was the scene that greeted me when I pulled onto my parents' street at 7:30 that evening. A gleaming new landscaping job transforming the once modest front yard, with professional lighting illuminating a stone pathway that hadn't existed during my Christmas visit. More cars than usual filled the driveway, including a brand new red Audi with a graduation tassel hanging from the rearview mirror that could only belong to Emma. My stomach clenched as I parked across the street, gathering both courage and the folder of documents before approaching the house that suddenly felt foreign. Through the large front window, I could see a dinner party in progress, crystal glasses catching the light from the new chandelier as my parents entertained guests in the freshly renovated dining room. The doorbell's chime sounded different, upgraded like everything else apparently had been in the past 6 months. My mother opened the door, her greeting smile freezing into shock as she registered my unannounced presence. "Olivia! What a surprise!" Her voice carried the brittle quality it adopted when plans deviated from her expectations. Behind her, my father appeared in the hallway, his confused expression quickly masked by forced joviality. "Look who's here! Everyone! Our other daughter has decided to join us." Other guests turned, curiosity evident as they examined the unexpected addition to their evening. Emma emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray of appetizers, her surprise seemingly more genuine. "Liv, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" I maintained a neutral expression, shifting the folder in my hands. "We need to talk, privately, about the mortgage." The word acted like a trigger, my mother's face paling as my father stepped forward quickly. "Everyone, please continue enjoying yourselves. Richard's famous bourbon bread pudding is almost ready. Martha, Emma, let's step into the study with Olivia for a moment." The study had been transformed like the rest of the house, featuring new built-in bookshelves, a leather executive desk, and oil paintings that looked expensive even to my untrained eye. I remained standing as they settled into various seats, Emma perching uncertainly on the edge of an armchair, clearly confused by the tension. "Would someone like to explain why there's a $600,000 mortgage in my name for a property I've never seen?" I placed the statement on the desk, the paper seeming to pulsate with the rhythm of my pounding heart. My father cleared his throat, adopting the authoritative tone he used when explaining why his decisions shouldn't be questioned. "Now, Olivia, there's no need for dramatics. This is a family matter that benefits all of us." "Fraud is not a family matter, Dad. It's a federal crime." My mother gasped at the word fraud, placing a manicured hand against her chest as though I'd physically struck her. "How can you use such ugly words about a decision made for the good of this family? After everything we've done for you?" I turned to Emma, whose expression had shifted from confusion to dawning comprehension. "Did you know about this?" She shook her head, but her eyes darted toward our parents, uncertainty evident in her fidgeting hands. "Know what exactly?" "That Mom and Dad bought the Hendersons' old house as an investment? They mentioned they got a great deal when the Hendersons moved to Florida." My father stood, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Let's discuss this rationally. Yes, we used your credit to secure the mortgage because your mother and I have had some business setbacks. The investment property is already appreciating in value, In a few years, we'll sell it at a profit that will benefit all of us. And in the meantime, who's making the $4,200 monthly payments? The silence that followed confirmed what I already knew. My mother recovered first, moving to sit beside me on the leather sofa, her hand reaching for mine, though I pulled away. Darling, we were going to discuss this with you once everything was settled. The renovations to our home needed to be completed first, and then there was Emma's graduation gift and tuition deposit for her master's program. And Dad's new golf club membership? The luxury cruise booking confirmation I saw on the hall table? Were those also priorities that came before telling me you committed identity theft? My voice remained steady even as my insides trembled with fury. Emma's eyes widened. Wait, Liv doesn't know about the mortgage? But it's in her name? My father made a dismissive gesture. Your sister has always been fiscally conservative to a fault. We knew she'd object initially before understanding the bigger picture. The power of attorney simply gave us flexibility to manage things without bothering her with details while she's focused on her career in Boston. Details? Details? My carefully maintained composure finally cracked. You forged my signature, stole my identity, leveraged my credit score that I've protected since I was 18, and committed mortgage fraud. These aren't details, they're crimes that carry jail time. Tears spilled down my cheeks, the betrayal finally overwhelming my professional demeanor. My mother's face hardened, the sympathetic facade dropping away. You're being selfish and hysterical. This mortgage helped pay off Emma's undergraduate loans so she could pursue her master's without debt. It funded the renovations that increased our property value by nearly 30%. It provided capital for your father's business expansion after his partner's embezzlement nearly ruined them. Each revelation felt like another blow, each benefit purchased with my stolen financial security. Emma at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. I didn't know the money for my loans came from Liv's credit. I thought you'd taken out a home equity loan like you discussed last year. My father poured himself a generous measure of whiskey, from a crystal decanter that definitely hadn't been part of their home decor 6 months ago. Olivia, you've always been the responsible one, the planner, the achiever. Emma needs more support to find her path. Your mother and I simply allocated family resources in the most efficient way to benefit everyone's future. Your credit score is already established. You can absorb this temporary arrangement until the investment property sells. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting deceptively cheerful patterns on the new quartz countertops as I sat at the breakfast table, having barely slept in the guest room that had once been my childhood bedroom before its recent transformation into a magazine-worthy space I hardly recognized. The confrontation had ended unresolved the previous night, with my parents asking their guests to leave early due to an unexpected family situation, and Emma retreating to her room after several attempts to talk to me through the locked guest room door. I had spent hours researching identity theft by family members on my phone, screenshots of statutes and legal advice accumulating alongside the growing documentation of my case. My mother bustled around the kitchen with practiced domesticity, the smell of bacon and coffee creating an illusion of normalcy that felt like another manipulation. You've always loved my blueberry pancakes, she remarked, sliding a perfect stack in front of me as though comfort food could erase financial fraud. My father entered wearing new designer loafers that probably cost more than my monthly student loan payment, newspaper tucked under his arm as he claimed his usual seat at the head of the table. Olivia, after a night's reflection, I hope you've gained some perspective on the situation. Before I could respond, the front door opened and closed, followed by the sound of keys dropping into the ceramic bowl my mother had kept in the entryway since I was a child. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing expensive athleisure wear and carrying a tray of coffees from the overpriced cafe downtown. Morning! I brought everyone's favorites. I figured we could use some premium caffeine for this conversation. She placed the specialty drinks in front of each of us with flourish. apparently unaware or unconcerned that her gesture illustrated exactly the kind of unnecessary spending that had become routine in this household. As we settled into this parody of family breakfast, my father cleared his throat, adopting his lecture tone that had intimidated me since childhood. Let me explain our financial situation more clearly, so you understand why we made these decisions. 3 years ago, my business partner diverted company funds into a private account, leaving the company on the brink of bankruptcy. Your mother and I have been rebuilding, but we needed capital that banks wouldn't provide given the circumstances. My mother reached over to pat his hand in practiced solidarity. We've worked so hard to maintain appearances, to ensure Emma could complete her education without the burden of knowing how precarious things were. The mortgage allowed us to consolidate our debts, invest in the necessary renovations to maintain our home's value, and provide for Emma's future. Emma nodded eagerly, seemingly untroubled by the moral implications of their financial strategy. And I got accepted to Northwestern's master's program in art therapy. The deposit was due last week, and thanks to Mom and Dad, I'll be starting this fall. Isn't that amazing? Her genuine enthusiasm made it clear she still didn't comprehend that her educational opportunity had been purchased with my stolen financial future. My mother reached across the table, attempting to clasp my hand, which I subtly withdrew. Pay for your sister. It's your duty. You've always been the successful one, Olivia. You have that wonderful job in Boston, your savings, your perfect credit history. Emma needs this opportunity to find her path, and as her sister, supporting her is your responsibility. We've always taught you that family comes first. My father nodded sagely, as though they were imparting timeless wisdom rather than justifying theft. The monthly payments are $4,200, which is manageable with your income. We've done the calculations. You'll need to tighten your budget, of course, but with your financial discipline, it's entirely feasible. Emma beamed at me from across the table, her expression suggesting she viewed this arrangement as evidence of my love rather than the criminal exploitation it was. I promise I'll make you proud, Liv. This degree will let me help children with trauma. It's my calling, I can feel it. Just like accounting was yours. I stared at each of their faces, searching for any sign of awareness about the magnitude of what they were asking, any flicker of understanding that they had violated my autonomy in the most fundamental way. Finding none, I felt a strange calm descend. Without conscious decision, my lips formed a smile that didn't reach my eyes. A diplomat's smile, a survivor's smile. My parents exchanged relieved glances, misinterpreting my expression as acquiescence. If they had known me as well as they knew Emma, they would have recognized it as something else entirely. The smile of someone seeing clearly for the first time. The smile of someone who has finally identified their opponents. The smile of someone preparing for battle. After excusing myself from breakfast, I retreated to the guest room that bore no resemblance to the space where I had once dreamed of financial independence and a life defined by my own choices, rather than family obligations. Sitting cross-legged, on the unfamiliar decorative bedspread, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet to calculate exactly what this mortgage would cost me. $4,200 monthly for 30 years, totaling $1,512,000 with interest, essentially destroying any chance of purchasing my own home, building retirement savings, or achieving the financial security I had worked toward since opening my first savings account at 12 years old, with babysitting money carefully tracked in a lined notebook. My hands trembled as I typed in the figures, the magnitude of the theft extending far beyond the principal amount into the very future I had planned with such care. I called Maya, my best friend since college orientation, when we bonded over being the only two students who had brought budgeting spreadsheets to manage our semester expenses. They did what? Her outrage provided the first moment of validation since this nightmare began, her instant recognition of the violation confirming I wasn't overreacting as my parents had suggested. Liv, this is criminal identity theft, not a family disagreement. You need to report this to the police and the credit bureaus immediately. The word police sent ice through my veins as unwelcome memories surfaced. My 10th birthday, when Emma accidentally broke the crystal vase my grandmother had given me. My mother insisting I lie to protect Emma from punishment. My high school. Valedictorian celebration dinner canceled because Emma had failed algebra and would feel bad seeing me celebrated. My full scholarship to Illinois diminished because Emma will need tuition money in a few years, so we can't contribute to your expenses now. Each instance represented a strand in the web of obligation and inequality that had defined our family dynamic, teaching me that my needs were perpetually secondary to my sisters. I can't send my parents to jail, Maya, but I can't pay this mortgage either. It would take everything I have and more. My voice broke as the implications fully registered. What kind of daughter refuses to help her family? What kind of sister denies her sibling an education? Maya's response was immediate and firm. The kind who recognizes emotional manipulation and financial abuse. The kind who understands that setting yourself on fire doesn't actually keep others warm. It just leaves everyone with ashes. What they're asking isn't help, Liv. It's servitude. Her clarity cut through the fog of guilt and obligation my parents had cultivated throughout my childhood. Still, disentangling from family expectations ingrained since birth wasn't as simple as recognizing their toxicity. They'll disown me if I fight this. Emma will never speak to me again. My extended family will see me as the villain. The isolation of that prospect felt suffocating, even as I recognized the dysfunctional nature of maintaining relationships through financial exploitation. Maya sighed, her voice softening. Maybe this is the universe forcing your hand, making you establish the boundaries you've never been able to set with them. Think about it. If you don't address this now, what's next? Another mortgage for Emma's future house? School tuition for future nieces and nephews? Your retirement savings liquidated for their comfort? There's no end to what people will take if you never say no. Her words resonated with the growing certainty that this crisis represented not just a financial turning point, but an existential one. Who was I beyond the family role I'd been assigned? What values would guide my life if I stepped outside the Carter family doctrine of uneven sacrifice? As we talked through options, scenarios, and potential outcomes, the weight on my chest gradually lightened. By the time we ended our 2-hour call, I had a preliminary plan, and Maya's promise to help in any way possible, including offering her spare bedroom if I needed temporary housing during the legal battle ahead. The conversation left me emotionally drained but clearer about the necessity of action. I lay back on the bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, memories surfacing of all the times I had accommodated family demands at personal cost, declining a summer internship abroad because Emma needed tutoring, lending money to my father for temporary business challenges that was never repaid, co-signing Emma's first apartment lease because my parents insisted it would teach her responsibility, though I ended up covering 3 months' rent when she decided the location wasn't convenient. Each instance had been framed as my duty, my obligation as the capable one, the successful one, the one who didn't need support because self-sufficiency had been demanded of me since childhood, while Emma remained perpetually in need of assistance. The mortgage represented not a break from this pattern, but its logical conclusion, the ultimate extraction of my resources justified by family loyalty. My parents had calculated correctly that this exploitation of my credit would go unnoticed for months due to my trust in them, and that when discovered, family obligation would likely compel my compliance as it always had before. What they hadn't factored into their equations was that their actions would finally make visible the underlying dynamics I had normalized throughout my life, creating the clarity needed to break free from patterns too painful to acknowledge until they reached this extreme. The realization brought both grief and strange relief, like finally naming a chronic pain that had been dismissed for years. I was mourning not just the financial security stolen from me, but the family I had believed. And despite evidence to the contrary, The parents I had trusted despite their history of prioritizing Emma's desires over my needs. The sister relationship that had been warped by our parents' favoritism into a creditor-debtor arrangement rather than a genuine bond. The grief felt endless, but beneath it ran a current of determination, strengthening with each moment of clarity. I would not pay for this mortgage. I would not sacrifice my future for their financial irresponsibility. I would not continue accepting the role of family resource to be depleted without consent or consideration. The next morning, I met with attorney Sarah Levinson, whose law firm specialized in identity theft cases, her office projecting competence with its organized minimalism and credentials displayed without ostentation. Based on what you've shared, and the documentation you've provided, this is textbook identity theft and mortgage fraud, she stated after reviewing my file, her expression serious but not unkind. The complication is that it involves family members, which creates both legal and emotional challenges. You have several options, ranging from filing criminal charges to attempting a negotiated solution where your parents refinance the mortgage into their names. She outlined each approach with methodical precision, detailing potential outcomes without minimizing the difficulty ahead. The worst approach would be making payments on this fraudulent loan, as that could be construed as acceptance of the debt. Whatever else happens, don't give them a penny toward this mortgage. Armed with legal advice and a clearer understanding of my position, I returned to my parents' house determined to attempt resolution without scorched earth tactics, holding on to a thin hope that confronted with legal realities, they might recognize the severity of their actions and work toward making things right. I found them in the living room, my mother arranging fresh flowers in an expensive-looking vase while my father worked on his laptop, both creating a picture of upper-middle-class contentment that now struck me as both fraudulent and unsustainable. We need to discuss solutions to this situation, I began, maintaining the professional tone I used with difficult clients. I've consulted an attorney who specializes in identity theft cases. My father closed his laptop with a sharp click, irritation evident in his tightened jaw. That was unnecessary and excessive. This is a family matter that should remain private. I continued, as though he hadn't spoken, drawing on reserves of calm developed through years of high-pressure audits. There are two viable paths forward. You can sell this house to pay off the fraudulent mortgage, or you can refinance the loan into your own names, removing me entirely from the obligation. Either way, the power of attorney document, which I never knowingly signed, needs to be legally revoked immediately. My mother's arranging hands froze mid-motion, flowers forgotten as her expression cycled through shock, hurt, and indignation with theatrical precision. Sell our home? After 30 years of memories? After all the work we've put into the renovations? How could you even suggest something so heartless? My father adopted a different tactic, his tone reasonable in the way that had often made me doubt my own perceptions throughout childhood. Olivia, you're overreacting to what is essentially a paperwork formality. The mortgage is in your name, yes, but the benefit is for our entire family. The investment property will appreciate significantly over 5 years, at which point we'll sell it and clear the debt entirely. Your credit score will only improve from the regular payments we'll be making. The deliberate use of "we" when referring to payments they expected to come from my account didn't escape my notice. I've reviewed your finances based on the statements. In your office, I countered, having done reconnaissance during their morning errands. You're already over-leveraged with credit card debt, the home equity line is maxed out, and Dad's business is showing consistent quarterly losses. There's no realistic scenario where you can manage this mortgage payment without my income, which you are not entitled to. Their expressions confirmed my assessment, though neither acknowledged it verbally. My mother switched tactics, tears welling in her expertly made-up eyes. After everything we've sacrificed for your education, your opportunities, this is how you repay us? With accusations and ultimatums? What happened to the daughter we raised to understand family loyalty? I recognized the guilt trip pathway we had traveled countless times. but now saw it for the manipulative detour it actually was. We can discuss my gratitude for actual support you've provided after we've resolved the felony fraud committed against me. The mortgage needs to be addressed immediately, as each day that passes compounds the damage to my financial future. The conversation deteriorated from there, cycling through familiar patterns. My father's authoritative dismissal, my mother's emotional manipulation, references to family obligation, reminders of Emma's needs and fragility compared to my resilience. When logical arguments failed to penetrate, they expanded the battlefield by calling a family dinner the following evening, surrounding me with aunts, uncles, and cousins who arrived pre-briefed with a sanitized version of the situation that cast me as the ungrateful daughter refusing to help during a family financial crisis. Your cousin Michael borrowed against his 401k to help his parents when they faced foreclosure, Aunt Patricia commented pointedly over dessert, unaware that the foreclosure had resulted from my uncle's gambling addiction rather than legitimate hardship. Family supports family through difficult times. That's the Carter way. Each relative contributed similar anecdotes of sacrifice, the collective pressure mounting as the evening progressed. Emma remained unusually quiet during this orchestrated intervention, occasionally making eye contact with me before quickly looking away, her discomfort evident, but her allegiance clearly still with our parents. As coffee was served, my mother delivered what she clearly considered the coup de grace. We've already told Emma's graduate program she'll be attending this fall. The second tuition installment is due next month. If you force this issue, Olivia, you'll be destroying your sister's future over a financial technicality that would cost you nothing but pride to accept. The table fell silent, all eyes turning. To me, the collective weight of family expectation pressing down like a physical force. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that I had been cast in a role written long before my birth. The responsible one, the provider, the safety net for others' dreams while my own remained secondary. The script called for me to yield now, to accept the financial burden with humble gratitude for the opportunity to serve my family's needs. For the first time in 28 years, I decided to rewrite the ending. I'll make a decision by tomorrow, I said quietly, rising from the table. Thank you for your perspectives. As I walked to the guest room, ignoring the whispered commentary behind me, I heard Emma's hurried footsteps following. Liv, wait, she called, catching up as I reached the door. I didn't know they put the mortgage in your name without telling you. That wasn't right. Her expression showed genuine concern, the first acknowledgement from any family member that a boundary had been crossed. But I really need this master's program. It's the only thing I've ever been certain about. Please, don't take this opportunity away from me. The familiar refrain of Emma's needs, Emma's dreams, Emma's opportunities played like a song I'd heard too many times to find melodic anymore. I'm not taking anything from you, Emma. Our parents are the ones who built your opportunity on fraudulent ground. If you want to be angry at someone, be angry at them for putting your education at risk by funding it through criminal means. She flinched at the word criminal, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. They were just trying to help. Me? They always say you're the strong one, the one who doesn't need support like I do. Is it really such a burden to help your family? In her question, I heard the echo of every message that had shaped our relationship, that my strength obligated me to compensate for others' weakness, that my success created debt rather than celebration, that my boundaries were selfishness while others' demands were justified needs. Emma, I've helped you my entire life. I've supported you, tutored you, co-signed your leases, covered your rent when you changed your mind about apartments. I've never begrudged you any of that. But this crosses every line. They stole my identity, committed fraud in my name, and now expect me to sacrifice my entire financial future for decisions made without my knowledge or consent. That's not help. It's exploitation. I closed the door gently but firmly, cutting off her response and the conversation, symbolic of the boundary I was finally establishing after a lifetime of porousness. Alone in the guest room, I made the calls that would change everything, setting in motion a plan that terrified and liberated me in equal measure. Spreadsheets have always been my refuge, the ordered rows and columns creating structure from chaos, numbers aligning into meaningful patterns that reveal hidden truths about businesses, investments, and in this case, my family's systemic financial exploitation. Working through the night in the guest room of what no longer felt like my childhood home, I created the most important financial model of my life, a comprehensive analysis of the mortgage fraud, its implications, and potential resolution scenarios. The document grew to include screenshots of the credit report showing the fraudulent mortgage, copies of my work schedule proving I was in Boston when many of the mortgage documents were supposedly signed in Chicago, calculations of the total financial damage including future interest payments, and detailed notes from my consultation with Attorney Levinson. By morning, I had a complete dossier documenting not just this incident but a pattern of financial manipulation stretching back years. Loans to my parents that were never repaid, Emma's expenses I had covered with the understanding of reimbursement that never materialized, and instances where my signature had been used without explicit consent on family financial matters. The evidence painted a disturbing picture of long-term financial abuse masked as family obligation, too systematic to be accidental and too consistent to be misunderstood. My second meeting with Sarah Levinson that afternoon provided clarity on my legal options and their potential consequences. Based on your documentation, you have a strong case for identity theft and mortgage fraud, she confirmed, reviewing my dossier with professional detachment. However, you should understand that pursuing criminal charges would likely result in your parents facing serious legal consequences, possibly including jail time, especially given the dollar amount involved and the evidence of premeditation. She outlined two primary pathways: legal action through both criminal and civil channels, which would likely sever family relationships permanently but provide the clearest financial resolution, or a negotiated settlement requiring my parents to immediately refinance the mortgage into their names and formally revoke the fraudulent power of attorney. The negotiated approach depends entirely on their cooperation, she cautioned. Given their response so far, you should be prepared for the possibility that legal action may become necessary regardless of your preference. Armed with this guidance, I contacted Professor James Wilson, my former finance ethics professor, who had become a mentor during my senior year capstone project. His response to my situation combined moral clarity with pragmatic advice. What they've done violates not just legal boundaries but fundamental ethical principles of autonomy and consent. You're not obligated to shield them from the consequences of actions they took deliberately, with full awareness of their wrongfulness. His perspective helped quiet the voice of guilt that still whispered I was betraying my family by protecting myself. Document everything. Engage only in writing or recorded conversations from this point forward, and be prepared for significant emotional manipulation as they realize you're serious about holding them accountable. With legal and ethical guidance supporting my position, I spent the rest of the day developing a formal settlement agreement with Attorney Levinson, offering my parents one final opportunity to resolve the situation without criminal charges. The document required them to refinance the mortgage into their own names within 30 days, immediately revoke the fraudulent power of attorney, provide a notarized statement acknowledging the mortgage was obtained without my knowledge or consent, and agree to a formal communication plan for any future financial matters involving family members. It represented firm boundaries wrapped in legal language, protection against the emotional manipulation tactics that had always eroded my resolve in the past. By evening, I had developed a comprehensive financial protection plan for myself regardless of the outcome, freezing my credit at all 3 major bureaus, changing all financial passwords and security questions that might contain information my family would know, developing an affidavit of fraud to dispute the mortgage with credit reporting agencies if necessary, and preparing documentation for potential criminal charges as a last resort. Maya offered her spare room in Boston if returning to my apartment proved financially untenable during the legal process, and Professor Wilson connected me with a financial counselor who specialized in identity theft recovery. For the first time, since discovering the mortgage, I felt the fog of betrayal lifting enough to see a path forward, difficult but navigable with the right supports in place. That night in the guest room, preparing for the final confrontation the next morning, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge what had been building since finding that mortgage statement in my mail. My relationship with my family would never be the same, regardless of the outcome. Best case scenario, we would establish new boundaries and slowly rebuild trust on different terms. Worst case, I might lose them entirely to protect my future. The grief of that potential loss washed over me in waves, memories of holiday gatherings, inside family jokes, the unconditional belonging that comes with shared history. Yet, interwoven with those warm recollections were the countless moments of inequity, the pattern of my needs being subordinated to Emma's, the subtle and not-so-subtle messaging that my primary value lay in what I could provide rather than who I was. As dawn approached, I made peace with what needed to happen, understanding that the outcome, however painful, would finally align my family relationships with reality, rather than the idealized version I had clung to despite evidence to the contrary. With the settlement agreement printed and my documentation organized, I prepared to face my parents not as the dutiful daughter seeking approval, but as an adult protecting her rightful boundaries against those who had proven they would violate them without hesitation. Late morning sunlight filtered through the dining room windows, illuminating the settlement agreement centered on the table like evidence at a trial, which in many ways it was: proof of broken trust, documentation of exploitation, physical manifestation of boundaries finally declared after years of encroachment. My parents sat opposite me, Attorney Levinson beside me, providing professional ballast against the emotional undertow, threatening to pull me back into familiar patterns of acquiescence. Emma hovered uncertainly in the doorway, not officially, invited to this meeting, but unwilling to miss the family drama reaching its climax. The silence stretched uncomfortably as my parents skimmed the document, their expressions transitioning from dismissive confidence to dawning comprehension of the precipice before them. "This is absurd legal posturing," my father finally declared, pushing the papers away with controlled contempt that couldn't quite mask his growing alarm. "You wouldn't actually file criminal charges against your own parents." Attorney Levinson maintained professional composure, her voice measured as she responded. "Ms. Carter has documented extensive evidence of identity theft and mortgage fraud, including the forgery of her signature on multiple documents and the fraudulent power of attorney. The dollar amount involved makes this a felony offense in Illinois. While she's offering you an opportunity to resolve this matter privately, she's fully prepared to pursue all legal remedies available if necessary." My mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, the practiced poise slipping to reveal genuine fear beneath. "Olivia, surely you understand we were acting in the family's best interest. Everything we've done has been to secure all our futures, including yours." I met her gaze steadily, my voice calmer than I had expected. "I have copies of the credit inquiries you made in my name before the mortgage was initiated, documentation of the notary who witnessed signatures on dates I was provably in Boston, and recordings of your own admissions that I never knew about this mortgage until receiving the statement last week. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a well-intentioned mistake. It was calculated identity theft executed over months with full awareness of its illegality." Emma stepped fully into the room then, her face pale as the implications registered. "Mom? Dad, is this true? Did you actually forge Liv's signature and set up fake power of attorney?" The uncertainty in her voice suggested she was finally questioning the family narrative for the first time. My father's expression hardened as he recognized his dwindling options, switching tactics with the desperation of someone seeing escape. Routes closing one by one. "We can't possibly refinance this mortgage into our names. No bank would approve us given the business difficulties I've explained. You're essentially demanding we sell our home immediately or face financial ruin. Your financial difficulties don't justify criminal activity against your daughter, Attorney Levinson noted calmly. And to be clear, you've already created financial ruin. You've simply attempted to transfer it to Olivia rather than face it yourselves. My mother broke then, tears streaming down her face in what I recognized as both genuine distress and strategic emotional manipulation. How can you do this to us? After everything we've sacrificed for you, this will destroy our family. The familiar guilt script activated lifelong programming, my chest tightening as conditioned responses threatened to override rational determination. I breathed deeply, recalling Maya's words about boundaries, Professor Wilson's ethical clarity, the spreadsheets documenting years of financial inequity. You destroyed our family when you decided my financial future was yours to sacrifice without my knowledge or consent. You destroyed our family when you prioritized renovations and luxury purchases over honesty and respect. You destroyed our family when you taught Emma that her needs automatically outweigh mine, that my purpose is to provide rather than to thrive in my own right. The raw truth hung in the air, decades of unspoken reality finally given voice. Emma stepped forward, her expression troubled as pieces of our family dynamic rearranged themselves in her understanding. I never asked for this. I never wanted my education to come at the cost of Liv's future. My father dismissed her with an impatient gesture. You're being naive and ungrateful, Emma. Everything we've done has been to provide opportunities for you that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Olivia has her career and financial stability. You needed the support more. In that moment, watching my father explicitly confirm the family hierarchy I had felt but never heard stated so plainly, something shifted in Emma's face. So Liv exists to support me? That's your grand family plan? One daughter succeeds so you can funnel her resources to the other? The growing awareness in her voice suggested a revelation forming, one that threatened the family mythology as much as my legal documentation did. My mother reached for Emma, attempting to pull her back into alignment. Don't twist our words, sweetheart. Family means supporting each other. Olivia has always been the strong one, the capable one. You have different gifts that need nurturing. Stop it, Emma said quietly, stepping away from our mother's reaching hand. Just stop. You're talking about her like she's a resource to be mined, not a person with her own dreams and needs. Her eyes met mine with newfound clarity. I had no idea, Liv. I swear. I knew they helped me more financially, but I never realized it was at your expense, and I certainly never knew about this mortgage. The unexpected alliance momentarily unbalanced me. Solidarity from the quarter I least expected. My father recognized the dangerous shift in momentum, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that had silenced family disagreements throughout my childhood. That's enough emotional dramatics from everyone. This situation has practical implications we need to address. Olivia, your ultimatum is simply not feasible. We cannot refinance or sell our home in 30 days. You're asking for the impossible and forcing us into financial catastrophe. Attorney Levinson slid a second document across the table. My client anticipated that response. This is an alternative proposal with a 90-day timeline for refinancing or property sale, with specific progress benchmarks that must be met to demonstrate good faith effort. It also requires immediate credit monitoring services for Olivia at your expense and formal revocation of the fraudulent power of attorney within 48 hours. My mother picked up the document with trembling fingers, desperation evident, as options narrowed. And if we refuse? If we can't meet these demands? I answered before my attorney could, my voice steady with conviction that had been building with each revelation. Then I file criminal charges for identity theft and mortgage fraud, submit formal fraud alerts to all credit bureaus explicitly naming you as the perpetrators, and pursue civil damages for the harm done to my financial standing and future. I'll execute this plan not with anger, but with the same methodical thoroughness I've applied to every spreadsheet I've ever created. This isn't a negotiation or a threat. It's simply the consequence of actions you chose to take, believing I would eventually comply rather than protect myself. The silence that followed held the weight of decades of family dynamics shifting irrevocably. The recognition that power had transferred from those who had always wielded it to the daughter. They had underestimated. My father stared at me as though seeing a stranger, perhaps finally recognizing the strength they had counted on to benefit them, had become the very quality that would hold them accountable. "We need time to review these terms with our own attorney," he finally said, the usual authority in his voice replaced by resignation. I stood, gathering my documentation with steady hands that no longer trembled with uncertainty or guilt. "You have 48 hours to sign the agreement or propose specific amendments your attorney believes are reasonable. After that, I proceed with reporting the fraud." As I turned to leave with Attorney Levinson, Emma followed us to the door, her expression troubled but resolute. "I'm sorry, Liv. I genuinely didn't understand what was happening. I'll talk to them, try to make them see reason." The sincerity in her voice suggested the possibility, however faint, that at least one relationship might survive this family earthquake. Walking away from the house that had never truly been the safe haven it appeared, I felt simultaneously hollowed out by grief and filled with a strange, powerful certainty. Whatever happened next, whether my parents chose legal compliance or criminal consequences, I had finally broken free from the invisible chains of obligation that had bound me to their vision of my purpose rather than my own. 3 months have passed since that final confrontation in my parents' dining room, the seasons changing from spring to summer as my life transformed from one of implicit obligation to deliberate choice. I'm sitting by the window in my new apartment, in Boston's Charlestown neighborhood, smaller than what I could have afforded before the mortgage crisis, but filled with furniture I selected for comfort rather than impression, artwork that speaks to my sensibilities rather than conforming to others' expectations. The legal process unfolded with the mechanical precision of systems designed to address fraud, impersonal yet effective in untangling the financial web my parents had woven with my identity. After initial resistance and unsuccessful attempts to negotiate more favorable terms, they ultimately faced the reality that their options had narrowed to compliance or criminal consequences. The fraudulent power of attorney was formally revoked within the required 48 hours, my credit reports now protected by freezes and monitoring services paid for by my parents as stipulated in our agreement. The mortgage presented more complicated challenges, my parents initially insisting they couldn't possibly qualify for refinancing or manage a property sale within 90 days. Reality proved otherwise when facing potential fraud charges. With assistance from my Aunt Patricia, who finally understood the severity of the situation after reviewing the evidence, they secured financing through a specialized lender, catering to borrowers with compromised credit histories. The interest rate was punitive, the terms stringent, but the mortgage was officially transferred from my name to theirs 68 days after our confrontation, removing the most immediate threat to my financial future. The relationship consequences have been as profound as the financial ones, family dynamics reconfigured in ways both painful and necessary. My parents' initial outrage gave way to grudging compliance when legal realities clarified their vulnerability, their communications, now characterized by formal caution rather than the easy presumption of access and influence that once defined our interactions. Weekly calls have been replaced by occasional emails, holiday gatherings uncertain as we navigate the new terrain of conditional rather than obligatory relationship. The most surprising development has been Emma's evolution, her initial shock at the family's financial manipulation, catalyzing a process of questioning other aspects of our parents' influence on her life choices. 3 weeks after the confrontation, she called me directly, her voice hesitant but determined. "I withdrew from Northwestern's program. It didn't feel right starting something built on what they did to you." That conversation marked the beginning of our relationship's reconstruction, no longer mediated through our parents' framing of me as provider and her as recipient, but direct, adult to adult, occasionally uncomfortable, but increasingly authentic. She found a part-time job while researching alternative programs with realistic financial paths. Her messages now often including questions about budgeting and financial independence that suggest a delayed but genuine interest in self-sufficiency. My emotional recovery has progressed more slowly than the legal resolution, working with a therapist to address the deep-seated guilt and obligation patterns established throughout childhood. Financial abuse often leaves invisible scars, Dr. Reynolds explained during our second session. You're mourning not just the breach of trust, but the relationship you believed existed, which the fraud revealed never truly did. Those words gave form to the grief that sometimes still washes over me when remembering family holidays or inside jokes, now tainted by awareness of the exploitation that ran beneath them. The hardest work has been establishing what Dr. Reynolds calls internal permission to prioritize my own well-being, to recognize that boundaries protect rather than harm healthy relationships, that my value exists independent of what I can provide to others. Professionally, I've channeled the analytical skills that once created family financial spreadsheets into a new specialization in fraud detection. My personal experience providing insight that technical training alone couldn't offer. My supervisor connected me with the firm's forensic accounting team, where my attention to detail and understanding of how emotional manipulation facilitates financial exploitation have proven unexpectedly valuable. The position offers both increased compensation and intellectual engagement that has helped restore my confidence after the profound violation of the mortgage fraud. Perhaps most significantly, I've developed what Maya calls my chosen family, relationships based on mutual support rather than obligation, with friends who celebrate my boundaries rather than testing them, who contribute to my life rather than primarily extracting from it. Weekend brunches, book club discussions, volunteer projects at the community garden. These simple interactions have gradually rebuilt my trust and connection, demonstrating that authentic relationships enrich rather than deplete. Financial recovery continues as a work in progress, my savings slowly rebuilding after legal expenses and the temporary income reduction during the height of the crisis. The mortgage no longer appears on my credit reports, though the initial damage required extensive documentation and persistence to address. I've resumed my first-time homebuyer research, the timeline extended but the goal still viable, now approached with both greater caution about financial entanglements and clearer vision about creating a space that truly belongs to me alone. The deepest lessons from this ordeal have crystallized gradually, like sediment settling after turbulence to reveal clear water above. I've learned that family obligation without reciprocal respect becomes exploitation regardless of blood ties or good intentions. I've discovered that financial independence requires vigilant protection, particularly from those who believe their relationship entitles them to circumvent consent. I've recognized that boundaries aren't selfish, but essential, defining where one person ends and another begins, creating the necessary space for authentic rather than coerced generosity. Most fundamentally, I've understood that love, which demands sacrifice without choice, is not love at all, but control disguised as care, a transaction rather than a relationship. As I finish writing this reflection, spring sunlight warming my face, through the window of an apartment that represents not what I once expected, but what I actively chose, I wonder about others who might be caught in similar webs of financial exploitation justified by family loyalty. Have you ever found yourself expected to sacrifice your financial security for others' comfort? Where is the line between generous support and harmful self-sacrifice in your relationships? I know now that freedom begins with naming exploitation for what it is, with the courage to prioritize protection over approval, with recognizing that genuine love strengthens rather than depletes. If my story resonates with your experiences, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in setting difficult boundaries makes the journey less isolating. If you found value in this account, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might need permission to protect their own financial futures from exploitation disguised as family duty. Thank you for witnessing my journey from obligation to empowerment, from inherited patterns to conscious choice, from exploitation to the profound peace of standing firmly in my own truth.